Hey Lisa, I see you in here. Um, there are some people having a hard time getting in, so I'm giving some extra space, some time to get in. I'm not sure why that is. What kind of internet magic is happening to have that go on? But um, give me just a moment to check some things. Lisa, if you would put in the chat or in the Q&A box, like, did you have to do something special or did you, like, which link did you use to get in? Oh, people are there's all right. We got Magali, we got Linda. Okay, folks are coming. Fair enough. Hi guys. I just want to hey, Magali, if you could let me know what happened with that link, if you could put it in like the chat or in the question and answer box so that I can know if there's something else I need to do. Was there a bad link that went out in one of those emails? They all should have been the same. You know, the internet though does crazy things for me, so who knows? So, I'm glad you guys are here. I hope everybody's excited for this. I am incredibly excited for you use the email link. Okay. Um, I'm excited about this. There is a lot of really, I don't know, this book, I highly recommend it. You know, I feel like I'm always recommending books. I don't, you know, that I'm the only illiterate physician you'll ever meet, but it's not because I'm spending all the time reading, it's that I'm listening to them. This book particularly, I listened to and read. I did both. I mean, like I would sit with the hard copy in my hand and listen to it also because it was really just so amazing that I wanted to try to really understand all of it and get all the information. So I'm really excited to share all of this with you. I'm going to share my slides with everybody so that they can see that. And I am going to hopefully, here we go. So definitely take a moment. Let me know where everybody's coming in from, like where you are located at. I'm super grateful you guys are here and I'm really excited to be sharing this information. Again, I'm digging this information amazingly, like really deeply, and I hope that you guys can get some benefit from it also. Um, so if you another book, because clearly, again, this is a book that I actually am just reading, and it's a paragraph, it's kind of a page a day book, but it's really, really great. I don't know how this Brianna Wiest, how she manages to have really meaningful stuff. Like she nails it every single time. The stuff that she puts out, she nails it every single time. Each day, I find myself feeling that way about the single paragraph or whatever in the pivot year. So Brianna Wiest, the pivot year, it's again, it's just a daily, it's almost like an affirmation book, but it's got one paragraph, one passage a day. And this is when I came across as I was prepping for this presentation. And it says, resilience isn't always toughness. Sometimes it's the softness to simply let things move through you. Sometimes it's the willingness to not act on emotions that you would not want to more fully express, but instead just feel them and let them go. This is what we're going to be working on and learning today. This is the thing that makes cravings not compel you anymore. If you think about what a craving is, like what are cravings? Cravings, desires, urges, they are feelings, they're emotions. And the question, do you want to more fully express these emotions? Do you want to amplify these emotions? Do you want to make them bigger? What if we were able to build up resilience enough to just feel the emotions and then release them and let them go? That is what we're going for as far as how to manage. My chat's disabled. Yes, I've tried to fix this. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I think I need to do a meeting instead of a chat or a meeting instead of a webinar. So thank you, Magali. This will be available. Yes. If you need to leave, it will be available at there will be emails sent out, but it's basically going to be hosted on YouTube and it'll be available there. So, all right, keep the questions in the question and answer. Any comments in the question and answer along that lines of the questions and answers. I do want to challenge you today to get this figured out. This concept is thinking about thinking. It's not hard to think about thinking, but if you're not practiced at it, it seems hard. It seems awkward. So we're going to get to this thinking about thinking at the end, but I'm challenging you today to figure it out on this call. Ask questions. I want you to ask questions until you understand what is going on, why you continue to crave the things that you crave. Don't hesitate to do that. There's going to be plenty of time at the end. Remember that the brain is a thinking organ, right? Our heart is a beating organ. It beats and it beats all the time. And if it stops beating, that's a condition we call death, right? The brain is a thinking organ and it thinks all the time. And if it stops thinking, that's a condition we call death. So our brain tends to get away from us with thinking, and that's really where we get stuck with these cravings. And we're going to talk about that today. We're going to kind of try to unpackage that today. But I do want you to make sure you ask any questions until you fully understand it. We're going to talk about cravings and where they come from. We're going to talk about why it's important to learn to effectively navigate these cravings. And then we're going to talk about how you actually do that navigation piece. So, what do you think about cravings? Like when I want you to, I want you to put it in the question and answer. I want to know, what do you think about cravings? What does your brain give you when you're like, cravings? What do you think? Some people talk about it being intense, or they wish the cravings would go away, or there are triggers everywhere. It's like constantly around me. Cravings feel hard. They feel difficult. They need to be avoided. I have to avoid them. I may not be able to push them aside. I become obsessed. My mouth starts watering. I want more. I'm searching for the salty and the sweet treats to relax. Another thought that a lot of times we get wrapped up in is that they make us happy, that there's a happiness involved with it. We're going to come back to what this happiness is, okay? Magali says that they feel powerful. When I think about cravings, they're very powerful. Their voice screaming inside my head that I can't ignore. Yes, this is it. This is why they feel so hard. We're going to talk about why that is. So my question to you is, why are they intense? Why are they screaming and you can't make them go away? Why do you need to make them go away? What's the problem that there are triggers everywhere? Why are they hard? Why do they need to be avoided? Why should I be pushing them away? Most of the time, and again, you can put this into the question and answer, most of the time, what people will tell me, what women tell me, is they're uncomfortable. My question is, why are they uncomfortable? Because they're not physically painful. They're not searing cuts on your arm. They're not inflamed toes or fingers. There's no damage to your body from the discomfort of the desire for food or the cravings for food. So why do they need to be resisted? What if, this is the mind stretch, what if the resisting of your cravings is what is making them so uncomfortable? What if that's what's making it hard? What if that's why I need to avoid it, is because I'm trying to avoid it? What if the need to keep pushing them away is because I need to keep pushing them away? What if this resistance to having a craving is what makes the experience so intense? So I want to make sure that I'm addressing, they don't serve us. So why doesn't a craving serve us? A craving is just like chocolate's good. That's not unserving to us. The compliance, like the action component, and we're going to talk about this in a habit loop, and we're going to talk about that and how it gets sticky. The eating, the food does not serve us, but the craving is not a problem. But we treat them as a problem, and that's what makes it so hard. So what if we stopped doing that and it was easy? So I want you to think of your favorite craving, or like the craving that you feel horribly compelled by, and put it in the chat box because this is always fun for me. For me, it's always sweets. It's chocolate, it's ice cream. When I think and when I want to build the feeling of craving, when I want to feel the desire for food, there is a dessert shop here in town, and they serve all sorts of things, but they have homemade ice cream. I'm pretty sure it's not homemade the way I make homemade ice cream, but I like to tell myself it's more clean than random ice cream that I would get at Brahms or whatever. So they have a cinnamon sour cream, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but that combination of taste is just really amazing. I love it. When I think of it, I can feel the craving, like it builds. So where is the craving? When I think about the craving, this feeling of desire of craving that food, where is it? It's right in the upper part of my chest and the lower part of my throat. There's some increased fullness, like saliva in the back of my throat. It's smooth, it's cool, it's kind of calm. There's not a lot of vibration with it anymore. There used to be a ton of vibration that's like, I want it, but I shouldn't. I want it, but I shouldn't. I want it, but I can't. It'd be easier if I didn't just have to want it. Why do I want it? I want it, but I shouldn't. I want it, but I shouldn't. That created all the friction for me. Okay. So I want you to think about, what is your craving? What food can you think of right now that gets your heart pumping, that you can feel the craving? Yeah, they torment us. This back and forth gives us that torment, right? Chocolate. Yeah, chocolate's another one. I don't typically feel this feeling, but I can feel, like right now, as I think about the cinnamon sour cream ice cream, I can feel it in my chest. It's almost even a heaviness in my chest. So the chocolate, the chips, what does that feel like in your body? I just described it in my chest to my lower throat. There's a fullness in the back of my throat. There's maybe some saliva back there. It's cool. It's smooth. It's calm for me now. It wasn't always the case. Can you describe it? Where is this feeling in your body? Is it hot? Is it cold? Does it radiate anywhere? What is the vibration to it? And then, even at the peak of when I was so compelled by my cravings, when I would have this, I want it, but I shouldn't. I want it. I wish I didn't. If I didn't want it, it'd be so easy. And this back and forth created this intense vibration, literally like a physical vibration in my body. The question to bring you out of that experience, out of the thinking about it, is, why is that a problem? Why is it a problem that I want the cinnamon and the sour cream ice cream? I know it sounds crazy, and I get that it's probably, why is it a problem that I want chocolate? Like, what's wrong with that? Why is it a problem that I'm drawn to that? Why is it a problem that I have a fullness, a heaviness in my chest and my lower throat, a fullness in the back of my throat, that I have maybe some saliva being produced, and there's this friction? What's wrong with that? Most of the time, what I hear is there's a discomfort associated with this, right? And that we don't want to have that discomfort. So this habit loop I want to talk about, because we're going to come back and see how the discomfort and the friction, this back and forth, I want it, but I shouldn't have it, really is created by this habit loop that we formed. Okay. Habit loops can be formed to gain reward or avoid punishment. You have approach behaviors to chase a reward, or avoidance behaviors to push away punishment. There's a positive and negative reinforcement. And you start to learn that stimuli are rewarding or punishing. At some point, we've done this with food. So you have a trigger, and then you have a behavior. And a trigger can be something as simple as curiosity, as just seeing something in the world, or a trigger can grow into desire, or just wanting the food. A desire is the trigger. Okay. Depending on your experience, on your subjective experience, your unique experience in the world, kind of determines what becomes triggers for you. Okay. But it always starts out with, there was a time where you never had any chocolate, and chocolate wasn't a desire. It was just something you saw, and you ate it, and you deemed it good. And there was a reward of dopamine released into your brain. Okay. As time progressed, you started to see chocolate as a reward, also as a way to avoid discomfort and punishment. Okay. This loop that's mediated, this trigger behavior reward loop, this is, Skinner's work back in the 40s and the 50s. This loop is mediated by dopamine, and that dopamine solidifies this as a behavior and a habit. Remember, dopamine is a molecule of motivation. It's going to motivate you to repeat whatever you did. Okay. That's where the trigger then suddenly becomes desire. Okay. The more dopamine that you're producing, the more quickly that forms, the more quickly that habit solidifies, and the more quickly or the more strong you're pushed towards that. Okay. This is just the way the science of the brain works. What happens when we get into addiction type behaviors and as addiction type reward based learning is this habit loop kind of runs rampant. Okay. So you can see here the green box in the center. This should feel spirally, but it was hard to get everything on the slide. But it starts with a trigger that can be as simple as curiosity. And then you eat the food, you have the behavior, and then the behavior is rewarded with the dopamine. That turns the trigger now into desire, right? And the desire means that you're going to eat more of it. And your behavior is you have a more heavy motivation, more dopamine motivating. That's the reward. You have the dopamine, which feels good, but that dopamine motivates you to do it again. So that then develops more desire and more excitement, which we're going to talk more about, like this feeling of excited. That becomes the trigger. And then you eat it more and you eat it excitedly and almost out of control. But in this effort, this hope, you're seeking to quench the desire, to stop the desire. How do I shut that down? And all you get is more reward of dopamine. And then you get a higher trigger of this desire and this excitement, but it turns into a stressor. Suddenly it's starting to spin a little bit out of control. And you're starting to get stressed. Like, I don't know that I really want to be eating this, but I have this heavy motivation to repeat it. You're eating, you have the behavior, and the behavior starts to feel out of control. And now suddenly the thing that was your reward is also your stressor. And that's where we really get into a pickle. Okay. When the craving for the thing is the reward, when the trigger and the reward are the same and is a source of stress, then we get into a pickle, right? Our craving for chocolate is a thing that we start to resist because it's a stressor. But the chocolate's the reward for the things that we've managed stressors with in the past. So suddenly we get ourselves stuck. Okay. Here we are thinking about the thinking, right? We want to stop this. I know the chocolate's a problem. That's a thought about the thought that I like chocolate. We're thinking about the thinking. It's not the chocolate that's the stressor. The thing that stresses you out is our thinking that I want the chocolate is a problem. Thinking about the craving, the thinking about the craving, and the desire for the chocolate is the stressful part. And because we have dealt with the stress in the past with the chocolate also becomes the cure for the stress. It's almost like a Stockholm syndrome, right? Like our craving for the thing is the cause of the discomfort and also the solution for the discomfort. We get stuck in that situation. So the increasing desire is going to lead to repeated uses that are unsatisfying, like they don't fix it. If you think about other desires that we have in the world, like if I have the desire to go to the bathroom, like I have this urge, which is similar to a desire or a craving. I have this urge to go to the bathroom. When I go to the bathroom and empty my bladder, it's gone. Like the urge is met. It's satisfied, right? Sleeping's the same way. I have a desire to sleep. I go sleep. I wake up, and the desire to sleep has been met. It's been satisfied. The problem with these foods, like if cookies satisfied the desire for cookies, you could eat one cookie and it'd be done. You'd be satisfied. But the fact is, it doesn't. And this is because of the way dopamine works. But this is why we get stuck in these addictive pathways. This is true for drug use. This is true for alcohol use. This is true for nicotine use. This is true for checking your likes on social media. This is true for checking emails. This is true for checking texts. If the checking of the Facebook quenched the thirst for checking of the Facebook, you wouldn't feel compelled to do it again in 3 minutes. Okay. And where we get stuck in this is the thinking about the thinking. So part of the issue of this is related to self-oriented reference. That's what they call it in literature, self-oriented reference. It's basically thinking about how I'm going to be affected by not having the thing that I'm using. And this is a basis for addiction behaviors, this self-oriented reference or behavior. How am I affected? If I'm not using, how am I affected? If I'm not using, how am I going to suffer? What's going to happen to me? I. How, can I handle not using? Will I break and use? What does it mean about me? My dogs are hearing the wind blowing outside and they're getting excited. So, what does it mean about me that I feel these things when I'm not using? Self-oriented reference is the basis for these addictive behaviors. I'm going to talk about it in cravings here in just a minute, but this self-oriented reference to our experience. Again, we're thinking about the experience. We're not actually just experiencing the experience. We're having thoughts about the experience. This this self-oriented reference, this behavior or this action or this experience of thinking about it, right? That actually lights up a part of our brain that is associated with addiction. It keeps us caught up in the experience, not just experiencing the experience. It keeps us stuck and caught up in the habit loop. So when you think about cravings as self-oriented experiences, this sounds like, how will I feel if I want it? How will I feel if I don't have it? What if I break and eat everything in the house? I don't want to feel uncomfortable. All of these are these self-oriented perceptions and experiences about what's going on. And we've learned that doing without the reward or the food, the thing that we're craving, is akin to punishment. So when we have to resist the craving, we start down this worry and the stress cycle about how am I going to handle it? And that means that the reward has also become a source of stress, right? The reward is the chocolate, but eating the chocolate is a source of stress. Okay. These are the thoughts that make it hard. I want it, but I shouldn't want it. These are the thoughts that create the suffering. It would be so much easier if I didn't want it. These are the self-protective thoughts. They're rooted in self-doubt. I cannot bear going without with wanting it and not having it. They breed guilt and shame. I shouldn't want it. I shouldn't eat it. So we're going to learn how these thoughts are optional and kind of a process of letting them go. So the Pali Canon is a collection. That's where this quote comes from. It's a collection of Buddhist scriptures. Whatever a person thinks upon frequently will become the inclination of the mind. And if this isn't a great description, really, of cravings, I don't know what is. But when we think about things frequently, yeah, Julie, I know the chat's disabled. I'm so sorry. If you could put any questions, I'm so glad I checked this. Put questions in the question and answer, the Q&A box, and I will make sure to get to them. It's an urgency. Yes, Magali, these feelings are an urgency that are uncomfortable. Absolutely. I will check the chat, Julie, every so often. So if I don't answer right away, bear with me. I will get to them. So increasingly thinking about the thinking about the experience. This is what we call metacognition. Okay. The resistance, I want it, is a thought, right? So the story, I want the food. I like the food. I like chocolate. It's a thought. And then we have a thought about that thought. I shouldn't want it. That's a judgment of the thoughts, right? This moves us into a stress pattern of learning, this addictive pattern of learning and thinking, versus I want the chocolate. And that's just a thought I had about the chocolate, right? I see something. Our brain, remember, guys, our brain is a prediction machine. That's all it does. Computers are prediction machines too, and the brain is like the highest, most evolved kind of prediction machine so far. AI is scaring me a little bit, but here we are. So your brain sees something and makes a prediction about it, and then it sends that prediction, that how do we relay that prediction from the computer to the action? It sends that through a feeling. That's how this works. And then that feeling drives actions. Okay. When you have a prediction that comes through your brain and your brain says, I want that, and your feeling is then desire or craving or urges. What makes those uncomfortable is when you then think about think about the prediction. I wish I didn't want that. It's wrong for me to want that. I shouldn't want that. You're getting a break and a gas. It's uncomfortable. It's hard. That is what makes it hard, right? Your brain has given you a prediction about chocolate. It tastes good. I like that. I want it. And then your brain starts thinking about that thought. It's wrong. I shouldn't want it. It's something I shouldn't do. I know that that's bad. I wish I were different. Okay. That leads to the stress. And that puts us, this again, this is that self-reference thought process. And it puts us in that part of our brain that really is lit up with addictive behaviors also. Okay. We judge the thought. Part of the reason that we judge the thought is because we have a belief that we think is true about chocolate and we don't want it to be wrong because it's how we identify, right? We want to keep believing the chocolate is good, something that we learned years ago. And so we fight to keep that belief. That creates this friction. I want is a story, which is answered with I shouldn't want it. And it creates this back and forth, this friction. We've learned, of course, to deal with stress and friction in the past with chocolate, which puts us into quite the pickle. So when we believe that chocolate is good, and that makes us resist wanting, or we feel like we need to resist that story because when it's good, we believe it's hard, but we want to hold on to the belief. We start thinking about it a lot. This becomes the inclination of our mind, which is why it seems to be in the forefront of our brains all the time. This belief that chocolate is good, this is a neutral thing that I'm saying, even though I would be interested to hear, and you can put it in the question and the answer box, like, when I say chocolate is good, what do you believe about that? What comes up in your brain immediately? Chocolate is good. What comes up in your brain? Usually the story that comes up in our brain, the initial story is chocolate, or this story of chocolate is good that comes up in our brain is based on subjective bias. So subjective bias is a bias towards perception based on our subjective experiences, the experiences we've had. Okay, so in the past, you had chocolate, you tasted it, it tasted good. Since then, when given the choice between chocolate and something else, hot tamales, maybe for me, I'm like just so not interested in hot tamales. I definitely lean towards the chocolate. And so I have definitely come to learn, and I believe that chocolate is good. Okay. We have developed a chocolate bias. It's subjective because it's based on our unique experiences. There are those weirdos out there who don't like chocolate, and that's cool. They've got some other issue. They've got some other food that likely is filling the space of chocolate in their world. Okay. This subjective bias is a cognitive distortion. And remember, when we have cognitive distortions, we have distorted perceptions. Okay. The distortion leads to us fighting to keep this belief, even when it works against us. So I want to talk a bit about subjective bias versus objective data. Hopping off now. Lisa, have a great day. I hope I didn't miss you. Sounds good. Let me know if you have any questions, friend. I don't know if she's already hopped off. Okay. So let's talk about subjective bias in comparison to objective data, because we see this in a lot of other places, and it may be easier for you to understand in some of these other places. We've definitely learned to view the world based on our biases and our subjective biases. A love for chocolate is a great example. Chocolate is good. That is my belief. I believe when chocolate hits my tongue that it tastes delicious. That's what I believe. Not everybody does, whatever. They're weird. Just kidding. If you're one of those people, I'm just kidding. But understand that there's something else that when it hits your tongue that you believe, maybe it's hot tamales, that you believe those taste good. Okay. We also see this in our belief and our love for celebrities, athletes, and politicians, right? Michael Jordan is good. That's, as a Chicago kid, like somebody who grew up in Chicago, we were Bulls fans. Michael Jordan's amazing. He's an amazing basketball player. And then moving to Kansas, where basketball is a huge thing in Kansas, like Michael Jordan's good in my world. But another person that people may have thought in the past is good was Lance Armstrong. But Lance Armstrong has kind of fallen from grace, right? So there's a lot of mixed opinions on Lance Armstrong. So what is your subjective bias about Lance Armstrong is really what this comes down to. People do this with politicians, people do this with celebrities, people do this with all sorts of things. We learn to view ourselves based on these subjective biases. So it becomes part of our identity. The version of us that we are versus the version of us that we want to be. Our subjective bias is usually the version of us that we want to be. The objective data is the version of us that we actually are. Okay. Again, cognitive distortion, subjective bias is a cognitive distortion, and it leads to a distorted reality, our distorted perception of what's going on. Okay. So what objective data do you actually have? When you're thinking about chocolate, what objective data do you actually have? When you're thinking about Lance Armstrong, Lance is good. Lance said he doped on Oprah. That's what Lance said he did. He used, performance enhancing drugs. He said it on Oprah. It came from his mouth, right? That's objective data that we have. Does that match what you think is good, right? People will bias their opinions based on these subjective biases. And it's to a point that it's very hard to let go of because it becomes kind of part of their identity. Chocolate is good. I have definitely lived this out in my life in various parts of time. Like I'm the girl that thinks chocolate is good. I'm the girl that thinks coffee is good, although this is particularly decaffeinated coffee. So it's like I like tell myself, like this is a subjective bias, guys. I tell myself that it's okay because it's just decaf coffee. Okay. We all have this. We all perceive the world in this way. The power becomes as if it is causing you problems, if it is the root of your issue. I don't sit there and fight my craving for coffee, right? Like I'm like, I want a cup of coffee. In the afternoon, I want a cup of coffee. I just don't drink it, right? Like I'm not stuck because of what I believe about coffee. I was stuck for a very long time because of what I believed about chocolate. Subjective bias leads us to get excited about these things, excited about politicians, about bands, about celebrities, and it leads us to get excited about food. My question to you is what's your objective data that you have about the food that you're eating? That's the question that you need to figure out. We're going to come back to this excited part. Oh, here we are right now. We're going to come back to it. Excitement is frequently confused for happiness. Okay. Chocolate makes me happy. No, you're getting excited about chocolate and you feel happy. You believe it's happy. You confuse yourself. You mistake excitement for happiness. When I asked on social media and I used it in the first slide, like, what do you think about cravings? Oh, I get mouth watering and then I get excited. And that wasn't what they said. I get mouth watering and then I get happy, is what they said. But the real feeling that you're having is excitement about the anticipation of this thing that you believe is good. Okay. Chocolate makes me happy. Your subjective bias is excitement associated with eating chocolate. Your objective data, ladies, listen, your objective data about chocolate is that it makes your blood sugars higher and it makes you feel out of control. We become enchanted. It's like excitement casts a spell on us, and we believe that it's happiness and joy. And we've heard this. Life is sweeter with chocolate. Chocolate makes my heart happy. Chocolate's therapy in a wrapper. But when we actually evaluate the objective data versus the subjective bias, when we actually allow ourselves to do it, we can realize what's really happening. We're mistaking excitement for happiness, number one. That's part of the subjective bias. Even when the data that we get, higher blood sugars and feeling out of control, that objective data does not support the subjective bias. Kind of like the belief that Lance Armstrong's amazing is not really supported by the objective data. Now, can we like him and like realize that like he's a human being and like fell from grace or whatever? Yeah, absolutely. But we don't need to be entirely like bought in to everything that he does is aligned with maybe our values and our authentic integrity. Okay. That's where evaluating this objective data versus your reconciling it with your subjective bias. Okay. So why do we want to learn to do this differently? We want to learn to do this differently, number one, because it really makes fixing your type 2 diabetes easier. When you can actually, what we call taste what's really going on, like you taste the actual outcome, you start to see the actual outcome, you look at the objective data and stop believing the subjective bias, that's when you can start to really see what's happening. And that's when it starts to make things easier. It becomes easier to just drop the thing that there's a problem with the craving. Like I don't have to only hear that I like the food. There's this other part of it, and I see it very clearly. That alone diffuses, de-intensifies the craving because you're not doing this back and forth friction anymore. Okay. The chocolate does not make it hard. Listen to me. Listen to me. I know people are like, no, it's the chocolate. The chocolate doesn't make it hard to reverse your type 2 diabetes. The resistance, the thought, the judgment about you liking the chocolate, that's what's making it hard. The resistance to the craving of the chocolate is what makes it hard. Okay. So again, you can actually taste the reward. And what I mean by that is you actually see and evaluate and acknowledge, you taste what actually happens with the quote unquote reward. It's not just that it tastes good, it's also an elevation in your blood sugars. It's the need for more meds. It becomes pricey because the meds cost money and the doctor's offices cost money. It's stressful because you worry about the blood sugars and the meds and the money. It's scary because you worry about not spending the life as long as you want to with the ones that you love. That's the actual taste of the quote unquote reward. That's the objective data that's happening with the thing, the subjective thing that you think that you subjectively believe you love. Okay. Second, if you can drop your distorted view of these foods, it's easier to not have it just makes it easier. That's where the ease that you're looking for comes from. Women ask me all the time, how do I feel the desire for foods? Like how really their question is, how do you stop desiring foods? Why don't you? They ask me because I can go into a break room with a box full of donuts. I can go into this, it's called Frost, this place with this ice cream. And I take my kids in there all the time and I let them get what they want. And I just look at stuff. I don't eat any of it. Women will ask me, how do I not desire that food? My answer to you guys, I always desire the food. I simply don't expect that I won't. And that means I don't have to fight it. Right? If you think about the Avengers, I have kids, we watch the Avengers. If these aren't your kind of shows, I'm sorry, but I think this is spot on. It's such a great example of this mentality. In one of the later Avengers movies, the Hulk has like gotten his anger under control and he like doesn't like lose his marbles and Hulk out and like make a mess of things all over the place. And the other Avengers are like, man, what's your secret? How are you not angry anymore? What's your secret to not being angry? uh, Iron Man asks him, how do you put a lid on it? And his answer, that's my secret. I'm always angry. He stopped expecting not to be angry. And when that fight wasn't there, he gained control of it. That is what I want to offer you. The lack of expectation that you're not going to want the food. Okay. How do we start to do this differently? This is not as sexy as you're going to think it is. You're like, oh, clearly there's a magic wand or a CAT scan that I can go into and they do that men in black thing and they erase it all. That is not going to happen. You have got to start practicing your feelings. You have to start feeling the feelings and doing it objectively. Like when I feel the desire for that ice cream, what does it feel like? It's here in the base of my throat and in my upper chest. And there's a fullness in the back of my throat. And maybe there's some water, like there's some saliva, like maybe it's kind of smooth. Like that's what I'm feeling. Objectively, what's the problem? Get curious. When you're in the space of curiosity, you actually move your brain. The centers that light up in your brain when you're curious are different centers that light up with addiction and with that kind of self-perception, that self perceived experience. Okay. Why? What's going to happen to me? Why is it going to be so hard for me? I'm going to suffer through it. That lights up a part of your brain that is associated with addiction. What's happening here? I wonder how this feels. I wonder what's happening with this. What's going to happen here for me? Right? Like that curiosity moves your brain from the addicted place, that addictive activity in your brain, to activities elsewhere in your brain. It just shuts that down. Okay. It gets you out of the stress habit loop. Again, lighting up that addictive pathway in your brain. What if you just desire the foods? What if you stop? How you do it differently is I would offer not what if, but you just stop wishing the desires weren't there. Stop resisting the desire for the foods. Resist the self-oriented protection behaviors that you've used in the past. These stem from doubt. They stem from self-doubt. I'm not going to be able to do it. They lead to guilt. I should be able to do this. Let's stop doing that. It's unnecessary. You have desire for foods. Of course, you have desire for foods. Why wouldn't you? It tastes good. The resistance leads to the persistence. The resisting of the desire keeps the desire there. The resistance to the craving keeps the craving there. If you can stop resisting it and just allow, remember the beginning of this, we talked about the allowance of a feeling to move through you. Stop resisting it, allow it to move through. That is how we do this differently. I know what you guys are thinking. You don't remember Gary Coleman. Maybe I'm the only one that still uses this phrase in their life. What you talking about, Willis? Right? This is so, this is just something we are not taught about. We aren't even taught about thinking. Like that's just so far from the things that we understand and that we've been talking, or we've been taught about in our life. Okay. Get curious. You're going to have to start wading into this and you're going to have to start practicing. The reason I had this right before Halloween is because Halloween is going to give you a great opportunity for most people, maybe not, but for a lot of people, you're going to get a great opportunity to practice the feeling of desire, of craving, of longing for foods. Okay. Get curious. Move out of that addiction pathway in your brain and allow your brain to start using other parts of your brain to manage this. What does the craving feel like in your body? Describe it. Where is it at? Does it radiate anywhere? Can you give it a color? Is it associated with anything else? The production of saliva, tense in your back, however it is, describe it. Put those, if you guys are starting to like, oh, actually, I can feel that. I want to hear those words. Put those words, the feeling that you're having in the chat box. Recognize, or the Q&A box, recognize that many times when I ask women that I'm coaching, and I'm like, hey, how you feeling about that? They give me a thought. I feel like this sucks. This sucks is a thought. It's not a feeling in your body. What is the feeling? A feeling in your body is a vibration that you can locate in your body. Okay. Sadness, lots of times it's in the pit of your stomach, maybe in the pit of your lungs, like in your solar plexus, and it feels heavy. It feels dark. It's like right there. I want you to use feeling words. How do these things feel in your body, not thought words? If you get a sentence when I ask you how you feel, that's a thought. I want a feeling word with it. Get curious, describe it, and then don't get caught up in it. Don't get caught up in the judgment of the feeling. It would be easier if I didn't feel this. It would be easier if I didn't want this. This is why it's so hard. Drop those. Just sit with that feeling. Just feel that emotion. Eventually it will dissipate. And I know you're thinking, no, I might die. That's a thought, right? That makes it hard. That's getting caught up in it, but we're going to talk about this. This is a practice that's taught in this book. Again, this book is by Judson Brewer. It's called The Craving Mind. I highly recommend it. It was amazing. He calls this riding the wave. You're going to have a trigger that is going to be desire, right? Like you saw food, you thought about food, your brain automatically triggers off desire, cravings, urges. You're going to have that feeling happen. Your brain, the habit loop that your brain has had is when it feels that, because your brain saw something and it said, I like it. And that like was transmitted to your body in the form of cravings and desires. The action, the habit, the performance, the behaviors that your body has done in the feeling, in the presence of the feeling of craving, is to eat that food. And then it was rewarded with dopamine from your brain. Okay. So riding the wave means that your brain sees the thing, has the trigger, and sends the message to the body, craving, but you don't have the action. You locate it in your body. It's in my upper chest and my lower throat, and there's saliva and there's urges, and there's this, coolness to it, and it's smooth. And this is what happens for me as I think about the cinnamon sour cream ice cream. That's what happens. And I feel that until over time it dissipates. It just goes away. It fades. I want you to think of a time where you've not been able to eat because you were maybe NPO for a procedure, or because the food that you wanted wasn't available, or maybe food in general wasn't available to you. What happened? You had a strong experience, an intense, maybe initial experience. And then you lived out your day without it and it faded away. Maybe it comes back, sure, but it's not like you're at that intense point, which your brain's like, oh my God, I can't live like this forever. That's what makes it hard. The subjective bias is what makes it hard. The objective data is actually that it fades away and it goes away. That's what happens. So that is what I've got. I want to hear, like, I'm gonna in the Q&A, I may be able to bring people on. I don't know. It's a vice on my head. Yes, yes. It's tense. It's pressuring. It's pressure. It's intense on your head. It feels so good, so calming. I feel fulfilled and anxiety alleviated. Yes. Julie, so I want you to realize that, and I want you to think about this, and we'll see if I can pull you on. I'm going to try to pull Magali on for a moment. But I want you to see the thing that feels good and the thing that feels satisfying and calming is the eating of the food. What we're talking about, what needs, that's like, what needs to be fixed is the craving of the food. Okay. That's the feeling I want you to describe. And anxiety is the feeling that came up. Like that's what you said. You've alleviated anxiety by eating it, right? That's the reward. I want you to go back to the trigger. What is this anxiety? Like, where is the anxiety? What are you anxious about? Because anxiety is almost always a crust emotion, meaning that, like, if you think of a pie, God, all of these freaking food references. But if you think of a pie, there's a crust. That's anxiety. What's inside the pie? Is it apple? Is it cherry? Is it chicken? I mean, what's inside the pie? That's what you're going to want to get curious about because that's where you're going to get that objective data versus that subjective bias. You're going to get to start pulling that out. Magali, I'm going to try to pull you on live. Oh, never mind. It just gives me the option. Seriously, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to win the Zoom wars that I have. I'm going to try to promote you to panelist. I've never done this, so we're going to see how it goes. Let's pray. Ooh, something's happening. Hi, friend. Hi, beautiful soul. How are you? Oh, unmute yourself. Sorry. Hi.
Hi, you see me? I don't see.
Oh, you may not see me because I've got the slides up.
I
Yes, I
see
do
you,
see you.
but do you see me?
I don't. I do see you, but here. Do you see
Oh,
me
okay,
now?
I am. Okay.
Jazz hands. Hi, friend. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So tell me what you think about all this.
Well, it makes perfect sense.
Good, because I think it's a complicated subject and I've been very stressed out about how much sense it will make.
What does
Good.
that feel like? I think that I never thought of it. It's interesting because you're saying it's basically like a muscle that we need to exercise, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's going to be a little painful. And I never, when you think of overcoming cravings, or you feel like it's a wave that's right on the back of your head, and you have to get away from it. So I
Yes.
never actually confront it and and practice it, because who wants to practice discomfort? I never looked at it that way. I figured that's just something I got to get away from. How do I get away from it? But it does make sense that you're never going to get away from it. I love always your comment. I hear it during the day. You're always going to love the Oreos. And she's right. I'm always going to love the Oreos.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's a whole new perspective, but it makes sense when I look at it in terms of even feeling it. The vice on my head, I want the chocolate. The chocolate's gonna make you feel better. And then if you sit with it for a minute, it's like nothing happened to me. I survived. I'm okay. And then you move on to the next. Kind of like when you fast, you're hungry, and then you go, all right, I'm hungry. I get it.
And
I'm
it
hungry.
fades.
Let me drink.
Exactly.
I'm gonna be okay. I'll live. I'll live to the next meal.
And your comment, like the chocolate's going to make me feel better, that's a great example that I wish I would have had when I put this PowerPoint together. That's a great example of subjective bias compared to objective data. The chocolate is going to make me feel better is not entirely like that's not the objective data you have. The
Right.
chocolate's going to make you worry. The chocolate's going to make your blood sugars go up. The chocolate's going to make you feel out of control.
Right, but that's right. That's not our first reaction. At least not my,
Yes. Well, yeah, because our brain, it visualizes everything through these. Like I said, I'm like, coffee is amazing. Coffee in my world. Oh my gosh, coffee is amazing, right? Like,
well,
but it's like clearly not an objective thing because it's not amazing to everybody.
and when I thought about it also, I realized something for me personally. My mom of Hispanic descent used to make us hot chocolate. She would grate the chocolate. It's this chocolate from Spain that you grate and then you
Oh,
cook,
yeah.
and it is, but again, so chocolate for me is comforting in every form, even with milk. So it's,
Yeah.
but I'm making the connection, and you've helped me so much with me being able to say, okay, and even after I eat the chocolate, everything else is still going to be there. So let's just bypass that. Because then, on top of everything else that's bothering me, I'm also going to feel the angst of why did I eat the chocolate? So, so
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that, that is the reality. And again, part of it, you're right. The initial part is kind of the being willing to be uncomfortable. And when we think about resilience, rubber band stretching and a rubber band coming back, rubber band stretching and a rubber band coming back, there is the element, am I willing to be stretched, right?
right.
And not break under that stretching because that doesn't keep the integrity of the rubber band coming back, right? Like we have to be stretched and come back, stretched and come back. And the more we get used to that, the more comfortable we get in that stretching and coming back, that stretching and coming back. So resilience is part of what we're looking to build here, and being uncomfortable or being willing to at least wade into the waters of discomfort is part one of that. Absolutely.
I think it makes sense, and I think it was great that you brought this facet to us because again, I would run away from it, but I equate it to working out. If you want to look better, you want your arms to look better, you're gonna have to do the weights, and it's gonna hurt the
You're
next
going to
the
have some sore mornings. Yes, yes.
bad mornings, and it's gonna be okay. And I think also in doing that exercise, I would think that you start feeling not as scared of the uncomfortable, and kind of it's like getting a flu shot or getting some procedure that you when you first get it you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen, and then you get it and you're like, no, it's okay, I'm going to get through it. So I think these are all really really good working tools for us. I'm going to certainly exercise and try and see
I love it.
how I do.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, I'm so glad. I'm glad you got here. Halloween's your birthday. I think you told me that. I love Halloween. It's my favorite.
My birthday, and I have to give myself a pass, and I'm going to a great place in Manhattan in the city. So whatever it is, I'm eating that day. I'm giving myself a pass because it's my birthday.
Yeah.
55th birthday, so it's like a big birthday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And recognize that's not necessarily cravings, right?
No,
Like,
that's planned indulgence that I'm
yes. Yes.
and then I'll get, but I noticed that the more I'm, you know, fostering better habits, um, the struggle is not as much, and it's becoming more of a reflex. Like today I was at Starbucks, and I looked and I saw all the pound cakes and all that, and my first reaction was like, oh, that has nothing to do with me, like that's not something I eat. For the
Yeah.
first time, oh,
Yeah.
I want the pound cake with the coffee, but and it caught me by surprise. So I think, you know, I see the difference between what I don't have control over, what's overtaking me like a craving, as
Hmm.
opposed to my birthday. I'm gonna enjoy it. It's a planned indulgence. Next day I'm back on whatever I'm trying to do.
And when you start making those decisions out of like when you're making those decisions ahead of time and you're not believing it's a craving and it's not this back and forth and the building of energy and the excitement, suddenly it actually does move into that joy and happiness part. And it's not this like out of control excitement component, which also makes it easier.
Because that whatever I see in the restaurant isn't gonna hit me like, oh, now I can't have that. I can't. It'll be like, okay, you got a free pass. You know you're gonna have enjoy whatever, and then that's it. And you get it out of your system, and So,
Yay. I love it. Well, happy birthday to you early because I'll be thinking of you. All
yep,
right.
so
I'm going to
much.
put you back. You are so welcome as an attendee. We're going to see how this goes. And then I am going to try to pull you on Julie. I'm not sure my dogs are like flipping out for a minute. I am going to try to and if you can't, Julie, that's fine. So don't um like I don't even know, of course, whether you're like in a place where you can chat or not. So definitely moving out of that excitement phase, there is a lack of control that is associated with excitement. So anytime that we get the opportunity to move out of that excitement phase, it can be very helpful in the way that we make decisions and we start to actually get into that objective data versus that subjective bias experience. Hi, Julie, how are you? Oh, I need you to unmute. I'm going to unmute you. Oh, see, I just tried to unmute. You do it again. I'm not going to touch anything.
Okay.
Hi,
I'm
friend.
trying to
How are
read it.
you?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, thoughts, feelings, it's calm and satisfying. What do you come up with? What's the anxiety?
So the anxiety is, first of all, it's a craving that I have for sugar, pure sugar. I like the jelly candies. This is something that it's just started happening over the
Hmm,
past couple of weeks. And I'm just going to speak although I know that many people have
sure.
similar issues. I suffered a lot of deprivation as a child, and I was a chubby kid, so I was always on a diet. At 6 years old, I had a hard-boiled egg and a thermos of tea for lunch and
Wow.
celery sticks. It was pretty awful. So we would have company. Those were the days, and people would come over for coffee and cake, and I would never be allowed to have the cake. So I lived in an apartment building at the time, and I would be helping clean up afterward. And inevitably, whatever cake was left over, we threw it away. And I had an incinerator room, and I would find myself throwing away the cake, but eating it by the handfuls in the incinerator room,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? I'm sorry. It's a very, very difficult
Yeah.
memory. So this feeling of deprivation started very early on because my life at home was was filled with deprivation, I feel. And then when I was with my grandparents, which I spent a lot of my time there, I could have whatever I wanted. So there was a huge disparity. So for me, I feel the emotion of it. And there's a level of deprivation that goes on now because I'm gluten intolerant. And a couple of months ago, I threw caution to the wind. I said, that's it. I'm eating gluten. I'm eating sugar. I
Hmm.
don't care. Because it's a battle. I don't have a big appetite. I don't eat a lot at all because I actually can't. I don't know why, but I can't. And my mother, who weighs 105 pounds, eats more than I do,
Hmm.
and she just can't even believe like I don't lose weight; it just stays. And I think a good measure of that is due to the insulin that I take. It just does not
Oh,
allow me.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's going to store up energy. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Is your subjective bias though that these sugar candies are going to fix your deprivation?
they do.
They
at
don't.
that, at that time. In that
Right.
moment, the satisfaction that
Yeah.
I feel a flood of endorphin. Like I could feel it,
Of
a
course.
flood of
Of course.
endorphins.
But it's an instant gratification at the cost of something bigger.
Absolutely.
You're not hearing any of that objective data.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the part. So there's a couple things. Like one, I would just start to see. I would get some, the metacognition means you get some perception, some lift, some distance above the experience. So you get some lift and you start looking at what's going on. My brain is telling me these candies are good. My brain is telling me if I don't eat them, I am deprived. I'm deprived in all of these other areas, and I shouldn't have to be deprived here.
Right.
So you get some lift and you look at that. You're not necessarily feeling it. You're just looking at the belief that you have.
Okay.
And then you start reconciling it with with your objective data. Like if I eat it, I'm deprived because I have to give myself shots of insulin, or I'm punished because there's painful shots, right? I'm deprived of maybe years of my life. I'm deprived of activity. I'm deprived of peace in my mind because I can't seem to get control of this eating,
Right.
right? So getting some perspective and looking at the experience, and then giving yourself some, what is the objective data of what I've actually had? I think that's part of it. The other part of it for you, Julie, is probably, and I'm sure that therapy has been in and out of your radar and maybe in and out of your life for years. And
30
so there's
years.
nothing new here.
Yeah.
But I would get very curious, we call it, and I roll my eyes and I really, 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 really do this work and believe that it's important. It's just got such a horrible connotation in general and like the lay public opinion about it. This inner child work, though, there is something that happened to you when you were a child that was
Mhm.
not dealt with for what you needed. Your internal, your core needed to happen was not happening. And maybe it was because our parents were unable or unaware or ill-equipped or whatever it was. Whatever it was, it just was not met. And now you're looking to food to meet that, and it's not meeting it, just like your parents weren't able to do.
Right.
It's our job as adults, once we're in that adult stage, once we progress into adults and somewhere, between 40 and 50 when that happens. I'm just kidding. But once we become adults, it's now our responsibility to figure out what it was that we need. And it wasn't candy and it wasn't chocolate cake. We needed to know we were loved. We needed to know that we were important. We needed to know that no matter what our bodies looked like, that we still held value, that we had value. Like, I wouldn't even say still. Like, my value is inherent regardless of what my body looks like. And if I didn't hear that from my mom, I need to start hearing it from me.
Right.
Right? That is probably, again, there's stress, and your mechanisms to deal with that stress up till now has been to eat the food. Until we start to really unpack that stress, and it might be the stress of the friction of I want it and I shouldn't, I want it and I shouldn't, I want it and I shouldn't. It may be that friction, but it
Right.
may also be this experience that you had about deprivation as a child, and nobody was really hearing what you needed them to hear from you. Nobody was acknowledging that. And that not being seen as a human being, we want to be seen. We're social creatures. We connect, we are connected. This is just part of our human experience on a biological level.
Right.
I wasn't seen. I need to be seen now. And probably the first and foremost person that you need to start seeing you is you. You need to start acknowledging what wasn't seen. You need to start assuring that child inside of you that no, your value is there, girl. It's always been there. We just need to maybe decide whether we want to be doing these other things. Your value's always been there and always will be there, no matter what. That's the
Yeah.
part that is probably at the foundation of that.
I've utilized therapy. It's a tool in my toolbox since I've been in therapy for 30 years.
Yeah.
But I've worked on other issues. I'm a survivor of assault and sexual abuse and incest and all of that. I've got a very high ACEs score.
Sure.
And food is not something that I ever really worked on. That's the one piece that I haven't. And at this point in my life, where I am, my age and the stage that I'm in, I want to hide. I do want to hide.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you want to hide?
I don't like how I look. I don't
Yeah.
like that I'm older and I haven't done what I've wanted to
Girl,
do. I
listen
don't
to
like that
me.
I'm sick.
You need to love yourself no matter. You cannot wait for others to do it. I'm serious. Like,
No, I
that
know.
shame right there is, the person that your inner being, that child, that young child by the incinerator, the person that she needs to recognize and acknowledge her is you, is the grown woman that you are today. She needs that. Until that starts happening, you're going to have the shame, which is going to keep you hiding, which is going to keep you turning to the sugary foods.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And it
get it.
is big work, girl. It is scary work. It is
Yeah.
big work, and it's exhausting work. And this goes back to kind of what Magali and I were talking about, the leaning in to being uncomfortable. Like, you're going to have to be like, all right, it's going to suck for a bit. Here we go. And not fight it. It shouldn't suck. It should be easier. This shouldn't be that bad. No, this is exactly how it's supposed to be because I'm doing the work, and work is hard.
Yeah, very hard. And being uncomfortable, exactly what it is. If I
Yeah.
don't satisfy that need for that sugar, I'm so uncomfortable. And,
Yes.
thinking about my next trip to the dollar store, and like I said, this has only been happening over the past 3 weeks. I don't know what's going on with
We'll
me.
recognize like it's been happening before then because we didn't get on insulin and diabetic without utilizing food for that same thing. You're just picking a
Right,
different flavor right now.
right, right.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And so, there's that saying by the coach, his last name's Jackson. I think it was a coach of the Bulls now that I think about it. But it's not practice makes perfect. It is truly like perfect practice. And I don't love the word perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. Practicing the behavior of managing our emotions with food does not fix managing your emotions with food, or like even being aware, like, oh, I'm aware that it's happening. We actually have to go through the uncomfortable part of I'm not doing that. I'm going to feel uncomfortable. I'm going to feel desire, and it's not going to be met. And what I call with the group, any other people in the group might be in here. I'm going to sit in my shitty diaper until this fades. Right. So that is, I mean, I think there's two things going on, but you're going to have to be willing to lean into that discomfort, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
I'm used to being uncomfortable, so
Yeah. Well, and it may get worse, and that's okay. You know how
yeah,
to manage that. Like it
right.
may get worse, and that's okay.
Right.
Yeah. Is
Thank you,
that
Delane.
helpful for you?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. You are so welcome. I'm going to put you back in attendee. I am going to briefly, I want to make sure there's no more question and answer. Okay. The Q&A box I think has been dealt with. So briefly, I am going to share maybe if you are interested in coaching, clearly like this reconciliation of the experience that you're having with with your subjective bias with that cognitive data, that there has to be a regular challenge there because we are taught to see the world, like because our experience of the world is really through the subjective data or the subjective bias. Because that exists, that means that we need somebody sometimes showing us and challenging the subjective bias that we're telling ourselves. The candy is good and it's going to help my deprivation. The candy is good and it's going to make it easier. That subjective bias with the objective data, that's where coaching is incredibly helpful. So I don't want anybody to leave here thinking that there isn't help. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about working together and working with me in the coaching group. So there are three components of the coaching group. There's the coaching, and of course, this helps you master these cravings. There are weekly coaching calls. You have access to at least 2 to 3 coaching calls each week. And again, my job as your coach is to challenge those subjective biases and help you reconcile it with your objective data. You gain knowledge about what foods work for you and what don't work for your body through the evaluation of daily food logs. Okay. You send me them, I send you information. You have kind of daily feedback on the foods that you're eating. There's an online portal that teaches all of the science and all of the tools and all of the strategies. There are 12 weeks of weekly modules, and then there's a bunch of bonus modules. You see, these are the things that when we work together, you get to lower. You see your blood sugar start to lower. You see your A1Cs down before your next doctor's appointment. You learn the skills and you have the support to help you learn how to manage these cravings. The cost of the program, it's a lifetime. You have lifetime access to coaching. The cost of it is $3,000 upfront, or if you need to make payments, it's 3 payments of $1,200. If this is something you're interested in, if this is something that you want to talk more about, send me an email. We'll get some time to set up, or some time set up so I can hop on a call. Or if you just want to go, we start on Mondays. Everybody starts on a Monday, and we can get you started for that. So that help is out there. Don't flounder through this. For me, it's like life is so short. Like no matter how, even if we live 150 years, it's still too short, right? Like grab that. Let's live that up. Get this fixed early so that you can go through and enjoy the rest of your life and the things that you want to do. All right, guys, that is all I have for everybody. I really hope that this gave you some helpful information. This will be up on YouTube. You can always listen on the replay if you're interested. If you have any questions about anything, don't hesitate to reach out to me. There will be more webinars next month. So look for those. Make sure you're following me on YouTube, following me on Instagram. Join the Facebook, the DelaneMD Reversing Diabetes Facebook group. You can go and join that, and there's help in there every day too. So, all right, everybody have a great weekend. Magali, have a happy Halloween if you're still here. Everybody have a good holiday. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.